Hi, everyone. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
Welcome to the musical Innertube, the podcast born out of a mistake.
We once meant to introduce a soothing musical interlude, but we said soothing musical Innertube, and the name stuck.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Well, we just celebrated International Guide Dog Day. The first one was celebrated in 1992. It's held on the last Wednesday of April each year. And I got some information on guide dogs from the International Guide Dog Federation. References to guide dogs, for example, I'm going to start from the very beginning because
Have you ever been on radio?
Yeah, I was sitting on a radio just last week.
Words,
all right.
Words, the final frontier.
I do speak English, it's just not well. All right, here we are.
I've only been in this country a short distance.
Well, we just celebrated the International Guide Dog Day. It was first celebrated in 1992. It's held on the last Wednesday of April of each year. And I got some information on guide dogs from the International Guide Dog Federation. For example, did you know references to guide dogs date back to the 16th century? 19,557 guide dogs are currently working worldwide. 2,598 guide dogs were trained during 2023, and 9,312 guide dog puppies started their guide dog training during 2023. Guide dogs are incredibly important to people who have either lost their sight or have trouble seeing, and there are guide dogs now that are helping people who have hearing deficits as well. We're talking with Mike Hingson. Mike is a man who has been working with guide dogs for years and years and years. And he told us about his experiences with guide dog Roselle in escaping one of the Twin Towers during the attack on 9/11. He's had a couple of guide dogs since then. And he is here to talk about International Guide Dog Day and all the fun guide dogs that he's been with. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing lovely. How are you?
I'm fine. And how is your guide dog today?
He's over here asleep, being bored.
All right.
His name is Alamo.
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 Very nice. Very good.
His name is Alamo. He's a black lab. He's my 8th guide dog. I got my first guide dog, Squire, in 1964. And we're recording this on May 2nd, which was Squire's birthday.
Oh.
Yeah.
When we first knew you, Michael, was Squire still your dog?
I think he was still. Squire retired in 1973, and then we got Holland.
Right.
But
so I did meet Squire.
You did meet Squire. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. We've known Mike since the 70s when he and John were on the air at KUCI in Irvine.
Yes. 89.9 on your FM radio dial.
For everybody who remembers FM radio dials.
Or on your FM radio digital display. But either way, it is still there.
Although now it's 88.
It is 88.9 now, yeah.
Yeah.
He moved to a better neighborhood.
Well, maybe.
Mike, tell us about the
closer to the edge.
the importance of your guide dogs over the years. What guide dogs? Most people think they just help blind people when they're trying to navigate, around a city or something like that. But there's a much closer bond between a person and their guide dogs. Is that right? Yeah.
So, look, let me do a little bit of description of what a guide dog is and what a guide dog isn't, and also love your statistics that you gave from the International Guide Dog Federation. So what a guide dog doesn't do is lead a blind person. And I see it so often, and I get so many press people who say, well, your guide dog led you down the stairs. I hate to tell you, guide dogs don't lead. But even more important than that, when we were going down the stairs, sometimes it was so crowded that the dog had to walk at heel behind me, and I wasn't even using the harness. I was using the leash, and my left hand that I would normally hold the harness on was holding onto stair rails. So, there's really not a lot to going down the stairs, but the purpose of a guide dog and the reason it's called a guide dog is that the dog guides. The dog's job is not to know where I want to go, nor is the dog's job to know how to get there. If I taught the dog how to find an emergency exit, for example, in the World Trade Center, what if that exit had been blocked? So it's not the dog. I don't want the dog to get into the habit of knowing a particular way or even memorizing a route. I want the dog to be prepared to listen to me. Now, how do I know where to go and how to get there? Gee, for me to tell you that would take as long as for you to describe to me what it's like and how you do it using your eyes in a way that I'm going to know it. The fact is that I learn techniques, I learn skills that allow me to know where I want to go and how to get there. And when I go to an unfamiliar place, unlike reading signs, I will use other techniques, sometimes using GPS on a phone with map programs like Google Maps or whatever to get information to the dog. I also use a tool called AIRA, AIRA, which stands, which is an artificial intelligent remote access, which is a piece of technology that runs on an iPhone or an Android phone, and it calls an agent who is specially trained to describe information to me, whatever it happens to be. And I'll call an agent if I want to go somewhere, and they can actually use the GPS information on my phone because the IRA app will access that. They'll see where I am, and they can say, oh, you want to go to, I'm in New York City. You want to go to Virgil's at 164th West 44th Street, best barbecue in the city. And they'll tell me how to get there if I don't know. Well, I know how to get to Virgil's any old time in New York City, but the point is still, I get that information and then I direct the dog step by step. The dog's job is to make sure that I walk safely. So the dog, in theory, won't lead me over to a manhole and when it's open, try to dump me down into the manhole. In theory, we have a good enough relationship that they won't do that. And they don't. It's love. But the value of the dog is to make sure that I walk safely. I have to be the one to be oriented to know where to go and how to get there. What really happens when you're working with a guide dog is you're developing a team. And I think it takes up to a year of really good work to develop enough of a teaming relationship that you truly trust. I think, like a lot of people say, dogs do love unconditionally, unless there's some real trauma that's happened to the dog where a human has beaten a dog. And that's happened a few times that I know of with dogs in general. But trust unconditionally. They're much more open to trust than we are. For a lot of reasons, we think everybody has hidden agendas and other things like that. That's not the way a dog operates. So generally, they're very open to trust, but you still have to earn that trust, just like they have to earn my trust. So I think that relationship takes a while, but when it works incredibly well, which is, of course, what happened on September 11th. But that's what a guide dog is really all about. And not any dog can be a guide dog. You talked about 9,000 puppies being raised. And the reality is that most of the guide dog schools, like in the United States, 10,000 of those 19,000 guide dog users are located. And in the United States, where schools, and mostly it happens elsewhere, breed their own dogs, the way the process works is a puppy is born, it's at the school for a few weeks. And as it's growing up for those first few weeks, they examine it. They see, like, even starting to walk up and down a flight of stairs, how it reacts to loud noises and so on. And then they send it to live with a person called a puppy raiser. In Britain and New Zealand, they call them puppy walkers. But what it is it's a home. The home of volunteers who say, we'll take care of the dog for a year, and they teach it basic obedience and so on. And then the dog comes back when it's now about 15, 16 months of age, or sometimes a little bit longer, just depending on schedules. And then it's taught the real, if you will, college advanced courses of becoming a guide dog. And anywhere during that process, if the dog doesn't measure up, it could be changed out of the program. We don't call it a failure because it's not a failure. Only about half of the dogs that are born, even through the schools, make it as guide dogs. And the reason is just like people, not everyone is cut out to do a particular job, and not every dog is cut out to be a guide dog. So only about half make it. The most successful breed is a Labrador, and now the cross between Labs and Goldens seem to do pretty well. But even with Labradors, it's about 50%. German Shepherds are around 25%, because if you really get a guide dog that's a German Shepherd that really is successful, the issue is that a lot of the herding instinct and all the other things that make a German Shepherd a shepherd out of the dog. So they just don't succeed as well. And golden retrievers have some issues, but they're a little bit more successful. Labs seem to do pretty well, even with a 50% success ratio. But the bottom line is that's where they come from.
That's interesting. And I want to talk about that because the Labrador Retriever, after many years of being treated kind of as a not intelligent dog, suddenly you're seeing it in the top 5 of the listings of intelligent dogs. What they have found, I think, is that the Labrador is plenty smart. It just doesn't get excited very much. It's very level-headed as a breed.
Yeah, it can get excited. But again, so here's the thing about dogs. Cesar Milano is really right. Dogs want to be part of a pack. And they want someone to lead the pack. That's what the human's job is.
Yes.
Whether it's a guide dog or a pet or whatever. And the problem is we don't set the rules very well. I've had so many people tell me, well, my dog could never do that. If I leave the house, my dog just tears things up or it just doesn't listen to me. And I'm sitting there going, well, let's see who the real culprit is here. But, the bottom line is the dogs want to know what the rules are. And if you really teach them the rules and you enforce it well with a lot of praise and so on, the dog will follow the rules. When I leave, I do tie the dog down still. If I'm not taking my guide dog with me, like Alamo, if I'm just taking a quick trip out to a bank or a store, I may not take Alamo, and I will tie him down to a chain that's attached to my bed. But even if I didn't, we've been together so long, he'll just stay there. He won't get up. He certainly won't go damage anything in the house because he knows what to expect from me, and he knows that I know what he'll do. It's that close of a tight relationship between dog and person.
That's interesting, too, because not all breeds can supply that. And just as not all human beings probably can keep their end up of the bargain as well. I'd love you to talk about what makes the breeds that are good at it.
One thing is that they focus. And so if I'm walking down the street and a cat goes across our path, Alamo will notice it. And he may want to go try to see it. But if I say leave it, he will. He gets right back into line. And of course, if Alamo wants to see a cat, he wants to make a new friend. I would never want a guide dog that hates cats. And we have a cat here in the house. So it's me, Alamo, and Stitch the cat. Everybody snuggles up to me at night. Well, Alamo doesn't get to sleep on the bed, but the cat does. And, the relationship is strong between all of us. But the issue is that for a guide dog, they don't get distracted if they're successful at guiding. They do learn what to expect from me, and I learn to expect what to expect from them. They're capable of learning the commands and following the commands that I provide. And you're right, they don't necessarily get overly excited, especially when the harness is on. And I've had very great success at teaching dogs when the harness is on. I don't tie the dog down. I want the dog to relax, and the dog plays, and we have fun together. And the dog can get excited when the harness is off, but not when the harness is on. So they do know the difference, and they understand what I expect from them, and that's what teamwork is all about.
What kind of training do the dog trainers go through? Because I'm sure that they all have to train the dogs in these common signals that you would know to give the dog. So the dog, there has to be a commonality in how the dogs are trained.
Sure. So there are a series of commands that the dogs know, like forward, halt, left, right, leave it, which is to pay attention, or let's go, or hop up, which is a command to speed up and again pay attention. And what everything is all about, though, is being positive. So if the dog misbehaves, what you don't do is you don't strike the dog. And if you have to use the leash to give a correction of some sort, it's not a sharp correction because you don't want to hurt the dog. What you want the dog to learn to understand is that your reaction, even just a slight tug on the leash and saying, leave it, is enough for the dog to go, oh my gosh, I screwed up, and go back to doing what they should. So there are a number of commands, and the trainers in California, for example, the process has typically been, and I don't know if the process has changed, but the law has changed. I'll get to that. But the trainers who become or want to be trainers apply, and they go through an apprenticeship, which is probably typically like 3 years. It used to be 3 years in California as required by law. There was an organization called the California State Guide Dog Board that enforced that, but the Guide Dog Board wasn't really apparently overly effective. I served on it a long time ago, actually, when I was at KUCI. I think I was on the board, but the board sunsetted a few years ago, so it doesn't exist. But the guide dog schools have recognized the value of having a fairly decently long apprenticeship, partly to make sure the trainers are going to stick with it, partly to make sure that they really learn from experienced instructors. And they will do some work with the dogs, and then they will do work under blindfold. And one of my favorite stories is about a guy named Todd Jurek, who was actually Roselle's trainer. And Todd worked at Guide Dogs for the Blind for a long time. And he was walking in San Rafael under blindfold when a truck, I think, was backing into him. And his dog, under training, pulled him out of the way. And dogs can do that. They also do have something that they learn called intelligent disobedience. So if the dog gets a command from me, or the dog sees a situation that it determines is unacceptable, the dog has the right to, for example, not let me cross the street. If I say forward and we start out and suddenly the dog jumps back, and I don't necessarily hear the fact that a hybrid vehicle is coming at us, or like in Todd's case, the dog saw this truck coming and pulled him out of the way. Again, that's part of the teaming relationship, is to respect the dog when the dog does something that I don't expect, assuming first that the dog knows what they're talking about. And when the dog knows that we share that level of confidence in each other, it's great, which is exactly what should happen. So intelligent disobedience is the mechanism and the way where the dog can, for example, say, I'm not going to let you cross the street because there's this car coming at us, or whatever the case happens to be.
So this is more than friendship between species. I think when people talk about guide dogs, there's a slight tendency to sentimentalize what's going on here.
Oh, yeah.
But there certainly is an awful lot of situational awareness, a lot of intelligence that I think we normally don't give dogs credit for.
Which we should.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, I've been impressed as we go, as we get older and older, and more and more research is done on dogs. The first thing to go out the window is the sort of strictly Pavlovian sense of dogs as completely controlled by their instincts and unable to break out of it at any time. We found out that they can weigh one outcome against another and choose it's limited, right? It's not like us, but it's still pretty impressive.
I don't know. It's better than some of us, but yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. And we'll be saying goodbye now to Michael Hingson, who will never be on the musical Innertube again.
I never mentioned your name.
No, I know you. Yeah, that's.
But he was pointing at you, so.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. It's like a certain president saying I didn't encourage people to break the law. Anyway.
I never had sex with that woman. Yeah, that's another one. But yeah. But the reality is that we do underestimate what these dogs can do. And it's just as true for our own pets. The relationship that I have with a guide dog is very much the kind of relationship that anyone can have with their pet dog, if they choose to do it. And like I said, if they develop that kind of relationship, if people really develop that kind of relationship, telling the dog, here are the rules. And also, it's a matter of teaching the dog the rules. And so, again, you don't ever do things in a negative way. You don't hit dogs. You might use a sharp command, like, as I said, with guide dogs, it's leave it or no or something. But you also do something else, which guide dog schools started to learn back at the beginning of the century. There's a device called a clicker. And a clicker is a device that when you click it, it's like made a sound when you push it. And what the cricket does is it becomes an absolute immediate demarcation. So like when I'm training my dog to do something that it doesn't know how to do, I have a clicker that I carry with me in my pocket. And I will, let's say I want the dog to point to a doorknob. I'll say, find the doorknob. What I'll do is I'll go up and tap the doorknob. And when the dog touches my hand with its nose, I'll immediately click. And then because that's a demarcation that said, great job. And also, I will immediately just give it a small piece of kibble. They love food, of course. Right. And I will work on that and then slowly move back from the door and say, find the doorknob. And when the dog catches on and goes up and touches the doorknob or points his head to the doorknob if it can't reach it, again, I'll click and give it a reward. But I know that the dog has got that command. And the clicker is an extremely powerful tool when it's used appropriately as a positive demarcation between a command and having done something right. And what that's actually done, and it started at Guide Dogs for the Blind, it has actually cut the training time of the dog when they come back from being with a puppy raiser in half. So typically dogs used to get 6 or 7 months of training, and now they're even better trained with only 3 months of training. When I went to get Alamo, I went to the guide dog school up in Oregon, and the first day when I had Alamo, his trainer was behind me and we were walking down a sidewalk. We got to a street corner. The dog stopped, but she clicked the clicker, and immediately I gave the dog a food reward. And the reason we did it that way was we wanted to start getting the dog used to getting the rewards and the stuff from me. We crossed the street. We walked partway down the next sidewalk and came to a big alleyway. So there was no curb, but when we were coming up to it, the trainer said, we're coming up to an alley, and I could hear when we got to it. She said, tell your dog to halt. I did. The dog stopped. She clicked. I gave the dog a food reward. We went back and did that a couple times. And what happened was that the dog learned every time you get to that alleyway, stop. I am sure that if I go back up to Gresham, Oregon now, some 6 years and 2 months after getting Alamo would still stop. He'll remember it. The clickers are that powerful of a training tool. And it's, again, a positive thing. It's all about telling the dog, this is what I expect you to do. You know the rules.
We'll return to the musical Innertube in just a moment, but first, please enjoy this soothing musical interlude.
In 1946, when the Guide Dog Foundation for the Blind was founded, its mission was simple: to provide guide dogs and training free of charge to people who are blind or have low vision. It costs more than $50,000 to breed, raise, train, and place one assistance dog. All of the foundation's services are provided at no charge to the individual. Funding comes from the generosity of individuals, corporations, foundations, and community organizations.
For more information and to donate to the Guide Dog Foundation, go to their website, guidedog.org. Another organization worth knowing about is Guide Dogs for the Blind. It's a group that Mike has worked with. It's the largest guide dog school in North America. More than 16,000 guide dog teams have graduated from GDB since their founding in 1942. All of their services are also provided free of charge, including personalized training and ongoing support, plus financial assistance for veterinary care if needed. For more information or to donate to Guide Dogs for the Blind, visit their website at guidedogs.com. And now, we return you to the musical Innertube, already in progress. I know when I've seen dogs out in public that are being trained by dog trainers, sometimes you are asked to not pet the dog,
right?
To stay away from the dog,
right?
And I'm assuming that's because you don't want to give your bad habits to the dog. They're learning the specific traits of being out in public and how to act when they're in public. Is that right?
Well, it's even a little bit different than that. It's not just dogs in training. When Alamo is in harness, I don't want anybody petting the dog, period. Because the dog's got a job to do. And I've had a woman come up and ask me, can I pet your dog? And I say no. And then I'm just standing there and we're talking. And all of a sudden, it wasn't so much Alamo, it was Africa before him, started kind of moving around. And I reached down and I happened to touch this woman's hand petting the dog. And I jerked a little, not hard, but on Africa's leash and said, leave it. And she said, oh, don't get mad at the dog. I was petting the dog. You should yell at me. I said, no, you don't understand. You got the dog in trouble because the dog knows better and knows that they're supposed to focus and not pay attention to you. You got the dog in trouble. I'm going to deal with the dog and then I'll deal with you. It's dangerous.
She went running down the road, absolutely terrified.
Except I took Africa's harness off and I said, go get her and kill.
There you go.
The bottom line is, it's important to know that when that dog is in harness, that dog is working. And petting the dog is going to be a distraction because they do like to visit. They like to make friends. Now, if that same woman had just left Africa alone, since I wasn't in a hurry, and if she hadn't done what she did, I would have taken Africa's harness off and said, all right, now you can visit, because they need time away from guiding. Guiding is extremely stressful for a dog. They take that job very, very seriously. And it's all about really, again, setting expectations, but it is very stressful. So they need relaxing time. And so when people come up and say, can I pet your dog? If I have time, I will stop and I will take the harness off and I'll explain, I'm taking the harness off because you can't pet the dog in harness. Then the harness comes off, the tail starts wagging and knocking me over, but they're visiting with the other person. Now, if it's a child, I don't care how much time I have or don't have. I will always stop and take the harness off for kids. It's so much fun.
Michael, you're an author. You're a much published guy. You're much in demand as a speaker. So you're in a lot of social situations where you're walking through a room with a lot of people in it. What are the rules in a situation like that when you're walking into a room with a bunch of new people? Now, some dogs, like my dog, takes his brain and throws it out the window and starts, just running around.
But whose fault is that? I'm just pointing out.
Well, I have the main training I've done is to walk on his left side when we go out. That's basically it. Though he is quite obedient in certain ways. Like if I tell him to sit, he'll sit.
Again, if the harness is on, I don't want the dog to be distracted by people. And if somebody comes up, I'll say, don't pet the dog because the dog is working. And the harness is on, the dog is working. When I do speeches, and, you mentioned that ever since September 11th, I've done a lot of traveling and speaking and talking about trust and teamwork and leadership. And I tell my story. And one of my favorite speeches is moving from diversity to inclusion, because diversity usually is about sexual orientation, race, and gender, but it's never about disabilities. And so the reality is that inclusion, we won't let people get away with, well, I don't include disabilities, but I include other things, so I'm involved with inclusion. No, you're not. You exclude some things, you're not inclusive. And,
Yes.
but the bottom line is that what I do is I travel and speak. So I'm used to it. That's a very good question that you asked. It's all about, when I speak, I will always say, don't pet the dog until the harness comes off. Now, you're right. I've authored books. My first book was a New York Times bestseller called Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust. And it is available anywhere you want to get books. It is out there, and I hope people will buy it. But the other thing about that is that after I speak and we go to the back of the room or wherever they set up a place for us to do it, I'll sell books. Like I'm traveling this next week to Saratoga, New York, and I will be there for a speech to Healthcare Associates of New York. And after the speech, I will be out at the registration table selling books. What I do when that's going on is take the harness off and tie, in this case, Alamo, with the leash to a table leg on the opposite side of the table from me. So, and then tell people as they come up, because even then they say, well, can I pet your dog? I said, yeah, the harness off, go ahead. And so Alamo is the greatest sales attractor in the world. And if I'm not careful, he'll pull the table trying to get to people. So, but, you know, you haven't lived until you've seen Alamo and Africa and all of my dogs. Roselle was the same way. When we talk at a school to elementary school kids or any school kids, of course, they all want to come up and talk to the dog afterwards, and I arrange for that to happen. You haven't lived until you've seen the dog lay down, stretch every appendage as far as it can to maximize petting space. They love it.
Now, can you treat the dog to bite people if they don't buy your book? Is that something that you
I believe in positive reinforcement, right? So I just say, look, you got to buy the book because Alamo would tell you if he could that we're running low on kibbles, and unless you buy books, he's going to starve. See, I want positive reinforcement. I don't want to have negative. I don't want people
positive reinforcement extends to people. That's very good. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, that's a lot like that old issue of the National Lampoon magazine. Buy this magazine or we'll shoot this dog.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. No, in this case, the dog would starve.
Oh.
So, you know, yeah, isn't that sad? But it is fun. And, you know, people, if they come up to Pet Alamo, they have to buy a book anyway. I mean, it works out very well.
Yeah. Being an author, of course, you write again. And you have a book coming out later in the year that kind of dovetails with everything that we've been talking about. What's your next book about?
So the book is entitled Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and walking in faith. You know, ever since September 11th, I talked about escaping from the tower, going downstairs, or even being in strange places and talking about some of that. Even the days at UC Irvine when we found all the underground steam tunnels. Remember those, John?
I do.
Take shortcuts. Yeah.
Yes.
So what I realized when the pandemic started is that I've talked about being able to walk without letting fear blind me or overwhelm me, but I never taught people how to do that. And so I started writing Live Like a Guide Dog, and Tyndale Publishing is putting it out in August. It is available for pre-order now. And so it's all about helping people learn to control fear. Well, how do you do that? Well, you know, what causes fear? Well, one of the things that really causes a lot of fear is that we worry about everything under the sun. You know, and like Mark Twain once said, we fear so many things, most of which will never come to pass. And if we would only deal with, and it goes back to a lesson I learned on September 11th, if we would only deal with the things that we can deal with and leave the rest alone, our minds would be less cluttered and would be a whole lot less fearful. So don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on the stuff that you can and leave the rest alone because you're not going to be able to do anything about it anyway. So when I wrote the book, we talk about those kinds of things. I talk about people taking a few minutes at night as they're going to sleep to kind of be introspective. What happened today? What worked well? What didn't work well? Why did the stuff that didn't work well not work? Or even the stuff that did work well, could I do it better? And really take just a few minutes to analyze that stuff in your own lives. And if you do that, you will start to realize that you can control the things that go on in your life, but you don't have to be afraid of the stuff that you can control because it won't affect you anyway. And another thing that I learned, I used to say, I record my speeches and I like to listen to them. And I used to say I'm my own worst critic. And literally only the last year I realized how negative of me, because I shouldn't be my own worst critic. I've learned that ultimately teachers can provide me with information, but I really have to teach myself and learn it. So I'm not my own worst critic. I'm my own best teacher. And that's a much more positive way to look at it. And so if you really look at yourself as your own best teacher in everything that you do, then again, you're working toward developing that muscle of your mind to use that fear as a powerful tool to help you. I mean, I was, as a story, and I tell it in Live Like a Guide Dog, we were up in Oregon. I was up with, it was Roselle. And I was at the guide dog school up there, and I stayed actually in town in an apartment that Guide Dogs for the Blind rented. And I was up as part of the staff speaking to the class and doing some other things with them for a couple of days. And so we got to the apartment, and then I decided I'd go out to dinner. And I got directions from someone to a place. We walked to the place, no problem. But when I came out, I don't know, I still don't remember today exactly what happened, but I retraced my steps, but did something wrong, and I didn't get back to the apartment. And I did that a couple of times, and I was getting a little bit concerned about what the heck am I going to do here? And then I realized, wait a minute, slow down. I actually had a talking GPS device in my pocket. I pulled it out and got it running and got right back to the apartment. But it took taking that mental step back and saying, wait a minute, let's look at what's really going on. And from that was a great lesson to learn, don't let yourself go down that rabbit hole of being petrified by something. Stop and you can figure it out.
Obviously, I think you had this outlook because of what you are and a guy who's been faced with things that some of us haven't been faced with. But do you think you learned a lot of it from having all of these close relationships with guide dogs?
Sure, absolutely. Here's an example. After September 11th, I contacted Guide Dogs for the Blind. I thought I knew the answer, but I contacted them and I said, look, I was in the World Trade Center. Do you think that's going to affect Roselle? And the questions that the trainers asked were like, did anything threaten her? Did anything hit her? Was she injured in any way? And the answer was no. And what brought it up was, as soon as we got home, I took Roselle's harness off, and I was going to take her outside, and she would have none of it. She leaped away, went and found her favorite tug toy, and started playing tug-of-war with my retired guide dog, Linny. She didn't even want to go outside. She wanted to play. It was over for her. And what the trainer said was, it was over for her because nothing threatened her. Dogs don't do what if. And we spend so much time doing what if that we what if everything to death. And again, we worry ourselves into being afraid of everything. So the whole point of the book is using the lessons I learned from working with 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog, who was actually Africa's mother, Fantasia, and the lessons we learned about strength and all the bravery and all the other things and the way the dogs behave that could help us behave better. And those are the lessons that I talk about in the book. And that's why it's called Live Like a Guide Dog.
Yeah. But Mike, what if the book doesn't sell?
We're going to blame you.
Oh, okay. As long as you have a plan.
Yeah. I hope people will order it. I hope people will pre-order it. And we're doing our best to educate people. And very seriously, as a speaker, of course, I will take it everywhere I can. And I hope that people who hear this will want me to come and speak. And we can talk about that anytime anyone wants to reach out to me. It's easy. speaker@michaelhingson.com. And Michael Hingson is MichaelHingson. So speaker@michaelhingson.com. And I would love to talk with anyone. And I hope people will buy the book. I think it's going to do pretty well because it really, to a large extent, follows on from Thunderdog, which was a bestseller. And I see no reason why this one shouldn't be as well. And again, if people want a speaker, I'd love to talk with them about that as well.
Mike, we'll talk with anybody because he talked with us today. So,
well, you talk to me, I guess you'll talk with anybody. Yeah. Aren't we all 3 humble?
Yeah. Humble is one word. There are other words that come to mind, but we can't say them. Mike, thanks for being with us today, and
My pleasure.
continued success. Good luck on your trip to Saratoga, and keep us informed about the book. Maybe we'll get back together in August and talk about the book once it's out.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And thanks again for talking with us today, and say hi to your pet.
Not a pet.
Give him a nice rub down when he's not in the harness.
And he's not in the harness, so I will.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Hey, let us know how we're doing. Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Do you know someone with a great story to tell? Let us know. Send us an email or log in to our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast. They're all there, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
And as always, our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.